الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أفضل الصلاة وأزكى التسليم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. آمين. اللهم اجعل الحق على قلوبنا وألسنتنا يا أرحم الراحمين وارزقنا الإخلاص في كل قول وعمل. Today inshallah we continue with Surah An-Nisa verse 100. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ومن يهاجر في سبيل الله يجد في الأرض مراغما كثيرا وسعة ومن يخرج من بيته مهاجرا إلى الله ورسوله ثم يدركه الموت فقد وقع أجره على الله وكان الله غفورا رحيما. As a continuation of the theme that we started yesterday with this notion of hijrah, immigrating for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these verses, He encourages the hijrah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever migrates in the way of Allah shall find on earth many places to settle and a wide dimension of resources. Those who leave their homes and they die while they're immigrating to Allah and His Messenger, their reward has already been secured with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their reward is established with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah is the most forgiving, most merciful. In these verses, we continue on the theme we said of immigrating. Yesterday, we talked about those who were had an excuse, said basically gave an excuse not to migrate with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what was their the outcome of this, and what is the exception of those who could not really immigrate, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives them. And today we talk about those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encouraging, people who are passing through, we said, oppression on the land. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them, it says, you need to migrate. And then when you migrate, that there's an encouragement for this. وَمَن يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ يَجِدْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُرَاغَمًا كَثِيرًا وَسَعًا. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when you do the immigration, the migration, it needs to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the intention is extremely important and clear from the beginning. I'm going somewhere else because I'm seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going somewhere else so I can establish my deen. I'm going somewhere else so I can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has to be in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting here. وَمَن يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises, يَجِدْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُرَاغَمًا كَثِيرًا وَسَعًا. The word muragaman, it's translated here as a place of migration, like a place where they can settle. It can be a place of a safe haven and others. So the word muragaman actually in the language, Arabic language, comes from ragam, which is the dirt, turab. It comes from turab. And the Mufassirin talk about this is that from the linguistic perspective, says when you say raghima anf fulan, says when you want to say humiliate someone or you want to defeat someone, what are you saying? It's like, I'm going to put basically their nose, which is usually a matter of like a sign of haughtiness, of kibr, right? You put your nose up like this. He said, I'm going to put their nose into the dirt to show a sign of defeat and humiliation, right? And as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this, using this word muraghaman, to indicate that those who were weak, those who were oppressed, when they follow this immigration, when they go to a different land, as if they are defeating and humiliating those who oppress them. So as if this new place that they went to, where they can flourish, where they can have ease, where they can have abundance, where they can practice the religion easily, it becomes a defeat and humiliation for those who were oppressing them. So when they hear the news about this person left their place and they went to somewhere and they became successful or they be able to establish the deen and so forth, what happens? These people who were oppressing them, they feel the defeat and the humiliation. So this word can be understood in that meaning. But the Mufassirin, as I said, they use also to give it like its meaning as a place where mutahawwal, right? A place that you can turn back to, or a place that you can migrate to, or a place you can settle to. Wasa'a, and we said the sa'a is the word like again of abundance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not specify abundance in what. It can be an abundance in rizq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you more, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the door of rizq. It can be in abundance, meaning that we said oppressed, there's a compression there when you're oppressed, when you're defeated in a place. Now, there's a place, there is a room for you to breathe. That's an abundance as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving the glad tidings for those who follow take this path of immigration for His path. As we know that this is the time of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Immigration to Medina with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an obligation for those living at that point. But for us, we said this still is a valid reason for us to immigrate. But even the scholars talk about the fact of the matter that immigration does not have to be like a permanent immigration. If you're going to go somewhere to study, for instance, that's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a form of immigration. They even talked about if you're going for Hajj, right? Go for some time. That's considered immigration. But there's a lot of places where one can still go for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised them that there will be abundance for them, going to be good for them, inshaAllah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, He says, وَمَن يَخْرُجْ مِن بَيْتِهِ مُهَاجِرًا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتِ فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. It says, and whoever leaves their homes and die while they're immigrating, what happens? It says, and die while they're immigrating, okay, their reward is for sure with Allah is guaranteed, or the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guaranteed. The Mufassirin talk about a story or a reason for revelation. One of the reasons of revelation can be a person who heard the verses that came yesterday, so I'm not going to repeat them, where it says that you have to go and leave the place of oppression. You can. So he heard that. He was in Mecca. He was a Muslim. He heard that. And he was actually an older person. He was actually sick at that point. So when he read these verses, he kind of reflected upon it. It says, I'm a person who actually have the means. I have the money. I have people, servants that can help me in this travel. I know the way to Medina. I have no excuse. So he had a reflection with himself, and he told his children, he said, put me, they call it a sarir, like a place where they travel, but it's like he's laying down, he was sick. So he couldn't travel just sitting down on a camel or a horse. So he put me on a place where I can lay down and travel, and he has his servants. And he took the niyyah, he took the intention to migrate. And then he leaves Mecca, and on his way there, they say Tan'im. If those who've been to Mecca before, Tan'im is Masjid Aisha, where you go and some people will go back to make another Umrah, right, to go outside. So it's right outside the Haram of Mecca, outside the boundaries of Mecca. He died there. Some Muslims reflect, they said, subhanAllah, he didn't get the edge, he didn't get the reward of the immigration. He tried, but he didn't get the reward. Some on the mushrikeen on the other side start saying subhanAllah. He didn't get, no, they didn't say subhanAllah, but they say what? They making fun of him. They said he neither got the migration he wanted, nor he stayed with his people and got buried with his people and so forth, as if he lost on both sides, basically. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals this verse. He says, no. Whoever takes the intention, and on their way there, they just took the intention, start the path, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes for them death, فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. As if the word waqa in Arabic is like, the reward have fallen already with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means Allah to granted them, guaranteed them the reward. فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. I always also reflect on this. There is nothing on earth, usually, again, as far as I know. When you go to work, you go to school, you go do anything, nobody guarantees you on intention. You have to get the work done. You can go at work and say, I had an intention to overperform, right? I was like, sir, where are the results? I could care less about your intention, I'm sorry. The only one that does that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His absolute mercy. Absolute karam, generosity. It's all based on intention. You do the intention, you take steps, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guarantees you that. That's only what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you, right? The level of karam, of generosity, of mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah ends this verse and He says, وَقَعَ أَجْرُ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. And Allah is all forgiving and the most merciful. In the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ إِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَن يَفْتِنَكُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِنَّ الْكَافِرِينَ كَانُوا لَكُمْ عَدُوًّا مُبِينًا. It says, when you believers are traveling, ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ means traveling. In the land, you will not be blamed for shortening your prayers if you fear that disbelievers may harm you. They are the disbelievers, meaning they are your sworn, indeed they are your sworn enemies. When you go on this immigration, there's a connection. When you're immigrating, you're traveling, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the door and says, whoever is traveling, وَإِذَا ضَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ. The scholars say that this is a verse that is the one that establishes this notion of qasr, which is shortening the prayer. Okay? There's more fiqh to it, as you said, we don't cover all the fiqh here, but the idea here is shortening the prayer from 4 to 2, meaning the dhuhr, asr, and isha, shortening it from 4 to 2. But this verse also, it says that no harm, there's no sin or there's no, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. There's no blame on you for shortening prayer. There's no blame on you for shortening the prayer. And the scholars here talk about the criteria that came. It says, if you fear the disbelievers may harm you. So we're talking about someone who's traveling, but there's an additional criteria of that they fear that the disbelievers may harm them. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constitutes for them or allows us to shorten the prayer during that time. A person came to Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, and he said, he's asking Umar al-Khattab about this verse directly. He says, this verse says that we can shorten if we're traveling, and there's a fear from our enemies that they're gonna harm us. So people now are safe. It was time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he was the Khalifa. He said, people now are safe, nobody fears anyone, there's no enemy, and we're good now. He said, subhanAllah, Umar al-Khattab sounds like, I was surprised from the same thing that you were asking. And I went and asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam myself. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said what? Sadaqa tasaddaqa Allahu biha alaykum. Says that if this is a charity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Meaning what? فَأَقْبَلُوا مِنَ اللَّهِ صَدَقَتِهِ. So accept Allah's charity on you. Meaning what? That they established the ruling of prayer, shortening the prayer while traveling. Even if there's no fear, this is a charity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some scholars talk about this and said this verse is still the ruling here is establishing the notion of fear. And tomorrow inshallah we'll talk about the verse of how to establish the prayer of, again, during war as well, the prayer of fear during war as well. But they're saying that this is, the verse is establishing the ruling for shortening in terms of fear. Even there's travel and fear. And the ruling for shortening the prayer and travel, which a lot of us, again, practice, is coming from the sunnah. Coming from the sunnah of Prophet ﷺ. Okay? And there's multiple narrations about this, of course, that Rasulullah ﷺ was shortening during his time, and during his safar and so forth. But here we can say, again, based on this ruling of Umar, right, or the interpretation of Umar, what he was saying was, he said that this is a charity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that allow us to shorten the prayer in terms of when we travel, right, even if there's no fear. But in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, especially if there's fear from your enemy, surely the disbelievers are vowed enemies for you and clear enemies for you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is also a very nice, beautiful thing about the deen. Whenever there's any hardship, Allah opens up ease for anything. When there's a hardship, this is someone is traveling, someone is doing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up ease for them. Said even if you're, but on the other side as well, the other point of this is what? Is like even while we're traveling, even when there is fear, to this level, nobody should abandon their prayer. You still establish your prayer. Albeit Allah made it easier for us to establish it. But you never let go of your prayer, regardless of what the circumstance are. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who establish their prayer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us peace and tranquility and safety in our lands. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who establish this deen in these lands, right, and follow the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all inshaAllah Jannah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. والسلام عليكم.